WrestleMania 22 review here today on WrestleRant. Graham Juice Matthews here. Hope you guys are doing well. And if you're wondering to yourself, where are the reviews of 19, 20, and 21 and 17? You skip from 16 to 18 to 22. What's up with this? And you obviously have not been listening. A lot of people have been watching since number 1, so if you have been, I commend you. Thank you. I appreciate it. But if you're one of the newer listeners, it's okay. If you want to catch up on my reviews of 19, 20, and 21 as well as 17, they're already up here on the channel. I reviewed them last year right on WrestleRant. So go back to last year, fast forward, go to my channel, type in WrestleMania 17 review, 19 review, 20 review, and 21 review. And they're all up here on the channel if you want to check them out. So go back and watch those if you haven't already. And this one might make a little bit more sense. But if you're only here for my review of WrestleMania 22, that's cool too. So kicking off the show we had the tag team title match between Big Show and Kane against Carlito and Chris Masters. So this matchup, I mean, it was okay for what it was, but a lot of with a lot of the subsequent WrestleManias, and what came to mind was WrestleMania 29 specifically, was that this matchup felt like it felt like something you would see on Raw. Big Show and Kane were a dominant tag team. I mean, they had that going, and Carlito and Masters were a good tag team as well. Why they never won the tag team titles was beyond me. And I would much rather have had Masters and Carlito as tag team champions as opposed to the Spirit Squad. I mean, they were very athletic and all, just the gimmick was so stupid, and they wanted to give them the belts because they were involved with D-Generation X, and D-Generation X never won the belts, and all this stupid shit. But still, though, I mean, it was a good matchup, only 7 minutes long. It didn't really feel like something you would see at WrestleMania. People cheered, were like, yay, Big Show and Kane won, but like I said, it just felt like something you would see at, on an episode of Raw or something. They could have easily done like a rematch the next time on Raw and it would not feel out of place. But still, nothing terrible. I will not shit on the matchup, even though I'm not the biggest Big Show fan. I mean, that's very well documented, but in 2006, he was still bearable. So a fine matchup for the tag team titles to kick off the show. The Money in the Bank ladder match up next with RVD taking on Finlay, Matt Hardy, Shelton Benjamin, Ric Flair, and Bobby Lashley. A really good ladder match, a really good Money in the Bank match. I mean, it's really hard to say. I mean, whenever someone asks me, what are the best Money in the Bank ladder matches in history, what's your favorite, what's the best one, it's really hard to say because they're all so good. I mean, I enjoy them all. My favorite personally is at 24, but there's been so many great ones over the years, and this was, I don't know if it was an underrated one. I thought it was better than the one at 23, kind of, but it was still a really good ladder match. Everyone involved, played a significant factor in the contest, and they were all great. Specifically, Shelton Benjamin, per usual, much like he was at 21 on this show as well. 24, 25, and in at 26, Shelton Benjamin was the fucking Money in the Bank ladder match master. He was so great. He was great on this show as well, taking that big dive from ringside. Bobby Lashley was like the match's powerhouse, so he kind of played his role well. Matt Hardy coming off that big push in 2005, so people thought that he might have had a chance of winning Ric Flair. Finlay was also being pushed at the time over on the SmackDown brand. Ric Flair coming off that great feud with Triple H, and RVD was coming back from injury. So everyone kind of had a reason for being in the matchup, kind of served a purpose, and they all kind of had a similar chance, an equal chance of winning. But the match itself was very, very well wrestled. I mean, not well wrestled, but it was very entertaining. I loved it. Really good matchup, and RVD would come out victorious as the new Mr. Money in the Bank, kind of paving the way for him cashing in at the ECW One Night Stand pay-per-view a couple of months later against John Cena, which I did review here on the channel. If you want to go back and check that out, cheap plug. But great match, though. Up next for the United States Championship, JBL taking on Chris Benoit. Good matchup. I mean, I'm not really the biggest JBL fan. I'm not going to say he was the greatest wrestler alive. He was not a wrestling god as he proclaimed himself to be. But Benoit kind of carried him to a good matchup. And I don't know. I just kind of felt like a step down for JBL. And even maybe Chris Benoit to an extent. I mean, JBL the year prior was in a WWE title match and lost to John Cena. Was never really the same since then. And then Benoit, on the other hand, had been in the main event of WrestleMania 2 years prior where he won the World Heavyweight Championship. Now, 2 years later is on the third match on the card for the United States title, but can't really complain. It was a good matchup. JBL cheated to win with Jillian Hall, with some assistance from her at ringside, picked up the win as the new United States champion, so kind of made for a moment at WrestleMania, but nothing really too special. I mean, it was a decent U.S. title match, but nothing to rave about. But this was worth raving about. The hardcore match between Edge and Mick Foley. Fantastic matchup. Could not say better things about it. I've seen it before. I think I watched it on the top 50 WWE OMG moments, which I have on DVD, and they showed the match in its entirety. I think the moment itself that was on the DVD was Edge, of course, spearing Mick Foley through the table, which I've seen a million times, but they showed the match in its entirety on the bonus disc or something like that. So I was able to watch this match again. I think I watched it for the first time a couple years ago, so to watch it again for the first time in like 2 years was really, really fun. I thought it was a great matchup. And Edge, I mean, and I'll talk about what I would have done for WrestleMania 22. I talked about this with my buddy John at underscore John's Jargon on Twitter. Make sure to follow that guy. He's awesome. But and I'll talk about what I would have done at WrestleMania at the end of the video. But after being fucking screwed out of the WWE title earlier on in the year, when he cashed in Money in the Bank after like fucking 10 months, the dude cashed in the briefcase, won the WWE title, got his huge moment at New Year's Revolution, only to get fucked out of that belt like 3 weeks later by John Cena at the Royal Rumble. And I think they might have done a rematch on Raw where Mick Foley was a special guest ref, kind of making, that's what the reasoning behind this matchup was. And Edge wanted his revenge on Mick Foley and make him suffer. But still, I mean, for a guy like Edge that got fucked out of that world title, and he would get it back later on in the year, of course. But he had a real chip on his shoulder on this show. And Mick Foley too, to an extent. I mean, the guy had a terrible showing, like I talked about in my WrestleMania 2000, WrestleMania 16 review. Had a terrible showing in that main event matchup, a match that he should not have come back for. And I enjoyed his match at WrestleMania 20, 2 years prior. I thought that was really, really good. I thought that was a nice matchup between Evolution and the Rock and Sock Connection. But easily, I would have to say, Mick Foley's best WrestleMania match ever. If not, if not better than those two matches, I think I would have to say ever, because I thought this matchup was great. A lot of great hardcore elements mixed in. And the best thing about this matchup, and we see this shit every single week with TNA. We see it with, every single week it's with TNA that we see the hardcore matches. It's done to fucking death with these old ECW guys. Granted, Mick Foley is an ex-ECW guy from the original ECW. But, he's not in hardcore matches every single week, or at least he wasn't during his WWE run from the late 90s to the early 2000s, coming into this matchup as well. So it didn't really feel overexposed. We don't see Edge in hardcore matches too often, or at least we didn't. That's why this matchup felt special, and the stipulation definitely enhanced the action. I thought both guys were great here. Mick Foley's had a tremendous performance, miles better than anything he did at WrestleMania 16. Or any of the previous WrestleManias for that matter. I thought that was great. And Edge here was just fantastic, and Lita played her role well at ringside, kind of aiding Edge to victory, lighting the table on fire. And what more can you say about that spot? It was sensational, made for a WrestleMania moment for both guys, with Edge spearing Mick Foley off the apron of the ring to the flaming table at ringside. It was just fantastic. What a surreal visual. And gave both guys a respective WrestleMania moment. Gave Edge the victory and a huge win, and kind of paving the way for him getting back into the title picture later on that year. So I thought the best match of the night. I thought this was not the saving grace, because I didn't think this was a bad show. It wasn't like WrestleMania 17 or 16, I'm sorry, where the only good match on that show was the triangle ladder match. Not the case here. I thought that the show was good, and I'll get to my full review, my full thoughts on the show at the end of the review. But just a great match, fantastic. Should have been higher up on the card. Boogeyman versus Booker T and Sharmell, just complete fucking waste of a matchup. I mean, I enjoy the Boogeyman. I think the gimmick's cool. I marked out a lot when he came back in the Rumble this past year. I gotta admit, I'm stupid like that. I enjoy that spot, but this was such a wasted feud. I mean, I think he was gone after this too. I think he got released like a month or two later, and they ended up bringing him back for a couple years when he left again in 2009. But what were they thinking? Because they had him beat JBL at the Rumble, and then he wins against Booker T here in the handicap matchup. And the guy was not a good wrestler. The gimmick is really fun, in my opinion. I enjoy it, but he's a terrible wrestler. Like Jim Cornette has a 100 different hilarious stories about this guy in developmental, which are just fucking hilarious. So you got to go check out after you watch this review or listen to this review. But, I mean, giving the guy an undefeated streak, like, what was the fucking point? They were never going to push him beyond a certain level. The guy was the boogeyman, for God's sakes. It was never like he was going to be contending for a world championship or anything. So really, that made really no sense, and the match was just kind of a waste. I mean, it was a nice way to kill the crowd, of course, coming off that great that great hardcore match. But the match itself was nothing to behold. I mean, you can rest assured that it was a pretty throwaway matchup. For the Women's Championship, up next, Mickie James versus Trish Stratus. In a match, I mean, the last truly great feud that we got in the women's division, in my opinion. I mean, of course, we have Trish and Lita, who rekindled the rivalry later on in the year over the Women's Championship before both of them retired, of course. But and before just recently, I was trying to think. I mean, I'm looking forward to the upcoming matchup at WrestleMania 31 between AJ Page and the Bella Twins, and I think I've never been that excited for a women's match. And I'm trying to think like the last time we had a truly really good women's match at WrestleMania that was not throwaway or a complete waste of time with no story. It was this one. I think WrestleMania 22 was the last WrestleMania with a really good women's match for the Women's Championship. So I thought that was great. A really, really good matchup and was very well wrestled. Mickie James was, for as awesome as she was as playing the crazy chick, she was also a great wrestler, too. I mean, she still is. I mean, I don't know if she's still wrestling now. I know she's pregnant or was pregnant with Magnus's child. And those two were, I think, engaged or something like that. But still, though, dating back to when she first debuted, she was awesome in the ring and as a character as well, and I really liked the long-term storytelling they had in place here with Mickie James being the stalker for Trish for months upon months upon months before finally pulling the trigger, doing the split shortly before WrestleMania, and doing the title change at WrestleMania, kind of passing the torch, so to speak, to Mickie James and kind of setting the stage for the career that she would have in WWE as a multi-time women's and divas champion. So good stuff there. Up next, The Undertaker versus Mark Henry in a casket match. Not one of the better Undertaker matches at WrestleMania. Probably the last bad match that Undertaker had WrestleMania before last year in his match against Brock Lesnar. I mean, it wasn't terrible. I mean, they served the purpose, and it was not. They only got little less than 10 minutes. And I think the casket stipulation definitely enhanced it. If it was a straight-up singles match, it would not have been a good matchup. I can guarantee you of that. Mark Henry recently said in an interview, and I respect the hell out of the guy, but he recently said in an interview that he's never had a bad match, and that had me laughing my ass off. Because the guy, although he's a specimen to behold, he was never the greatest wrestler until just a couple of years ago when he was doing the whole Hall of Pain thing. And he was getting a big push around this period in time, and I understand why they would put him against The Undertaker and have him try to claim the streak. But, to have Undertaker and Mark Henry together at WrestleMania was kind of something you would see in like the 90s, not in 2006. It's not a good matchup. I mean, it was okay for what it was, and the sole spot that made it worth watching was Undertaker doing the dive off the top rope and going Air Undertaker, which he had been known to do after that in his matches against Batista and Edge and later Shawn Michaels at WrestleMania 25, almost killing Sim Snuka. But, I think this was the last quote-unquote bad match that Taker had at WrestleMania before, his most recent bout with Brock Lesnar last year. But anyway, Undertaker coming out victorious, extending the streak, I believe, to 14-0 at WrestleMania. So, okay stuff there. I mean, it would have been it would have been a worse match had he not done that spot, but that kind of saved it and was the highlight reel moment from that matchup. Up next, Shawn Michaels versus Mr. McMahon in a no-holds-barred match. And you've heard the rumors. I don't really need to go into full depth here. But, of course, the original two matches scheduled for WrestleMania was Shawn Michaels versus Eddie Guerrero. And I guess, one of the creative writers in late 2013, I think, or 2014 maybe, went on record in saying that was the match that we were supposed to get at WrestleMania 22. While Mr. McMahon was going to face Bret Hart, who got inducted into the Hall of Fame the night prior. And Bret Hart even refused to appear at WrestleMania because he felt uncomfortable, which was unfortunate. And they would end up doing that match a couple years later at WrestleMania 26. So they ended up putting these two guys together instead and kind of stemmed off the Montreal Screwjob. And, Shawn Michaels made it entertaining by, all the hardcore spots and, just giving Mr. McMahon his comeuppance. But that should have been the end of the feud right there. They didn't need to drag it out for fucking 6 more months and, bring back the X, which was fun. But then incorporate the Spirit Squad and Shane and the Big Show, and it just got really watered down. If it wasn't watered down already, it was watered down by the time they finally ended it, like Unforgiven in September. But, they made it work. Shawn Michaels made it work. I mean, it was not your Matt Classic, not the best match that Michaels has had at WrestleMania compared to his matches with The Undertaker, of all people, and Benoit at WrestleMania 20, and Triple H, and everyone else, Kurt Angle especially, coming off his, classic match with Angle at WrestleMania 21. It was not the best Mania match he ever had, but for what it was, they made it entertaining after Shawn Michaels pretty much decimated McMahon and picked up the victory after, super kicking his teeth right down his throat at the end of it. So, they made it enjoyable. It was not the best match, but for what it was, it served the purpose. Michaels got the win. It was what it was. Up next for the World Heavyweight Championship, Rey Mysterio winning the World Championship in a triple threat against Randy Orton and Kurt Angle. Really, really good matchup from start to finish. A lot of great action. My only real complaint against it was the fact that it had 9 minutes, and that's not their fault. It's the management's fault. I mean, they could have cut a few minutes off Cena and Triple H. The matchup should have been the main event regardless. I mean, there was no reason for... and Rey Mysterio got booed on this show. I mean, maybe people resented him for getting the push, the Eddie Guerrero push, and because of him, whatever. I didn't think people started to get sick of him until a couple years later, or at least a couple months at the very earliest. I didn't think they were sick of him at WrestleMania. But then again, this was Chicago, so I shouldn't have been too surprised. A very, not a smarky crowd, but, a very... very vocal crowd. I mean, I guess that's for lack of a better term. But still, though, a great matchup. Definitely should have gotten more time. Rey Mysterio picking up the big win, your new World Heavyweight Champion. What was the reasoning behind him not going, not having this match in the main event? I know John Cena it didn't main event WrestleMania the year before, and they could have had a main event WrestleMania the following year, and I know they were trying to build him up as the next big thing, the next face of the company, but would have been nice if that matchup closed the show. But still, though, great matchup. Rey Mysterio, the new World Heavyweight Champion. Pretty much a throwaway women's match, Playboy pillow fight that no one gave two shits about. Entertaining in terms of eye candy and stuff, but it served its purpose in killing the crowd after that. The great triple threat with Tori Wilson defeating Candice Michelle. And then we get to the main event, John Cena versus Triple H for the WWE title. John Cena walking in as champion and walking out as champion as well. A really solid matchup. Really good matchup. The first ever one-on-one encounter, to my knowledge, between Cena and Triple H. And CM Punk also was kind of on the... with a machine gun hanging off the car, as John Cena made his entrance. Not his best Mania entrance, but kind of fitting in with the mob theme in Chicago, which was pretty clever. So it was funny seeing CM Punk. But the match itself was really, really good. John Cena getting a big victory, kind of solidifying himself as a star by forcing Triple H to submit. And there were some people in the crowd, they showed some reactions from the fans that were shocked that Triple H tapped out so close to the rope. So kind of felt like he came out of nowhere, but like a good kind of coming out of nowhere kind of sense. Not like the finish was completely random, but it was something that you wouldn't expect. And for that reason alone, I liked it. So a really good match from John Cena and Triple H. Going back to what I was saying earlier, and I was talking to John a couple weeks ago in terms of how I would have booked this WrestleMania instead. And I mean, it has its pros and its cons, but it would have made more sense, to me anyway, that you could have done Triple H and Michaels, because Triple H was getting cheered in the show anyway. They did the little, the teases for DX, and they would end up reuniting a couple weeks later. But you could have just done DX versus the McMahons on the show instead of Michaels versus McMahon. It was not that great of a matchup that you couldn't have done that instead, and we ended up getting that matchup at fucking SummerSlam. And like I said, there was no real reason to drag that feud as long out as they did. So we would have gotten that matchup, and you could have done John Cena versus Edge at WrestleMania instead. And I know we got it at WrestleMania 25 in a way, but it wasn't the same in a triple threat match. It would have been way better one-on-one, but whatever. Because like I said before, Edge pretty much got fucking screwed out of the WWE title early on in the year with the Money in the Bank briefcase and cashing in and winning the belt and losing it like 3 weeks later, and that pissed him off and that pissed fans off, rightfully so. The booking of that just really wasn't thought out too well. Still, though, I thought it was they could have done Cena and Edge and then the McMahons versus DX, but then of course the cons of that was, we would not have gotten the tremendous Edge and Mick Foley matchup, and Edge and Cena ended up having their great feud later on in the year, but my only complaint was that it wasn't at WrestleMania. But I want to get your thoughts on that. Leave a comment down below or tweet me on Twitter at WrestleRant. Find me on Facebook at Graham Jason Matthews. And give me your thoughts on that WrestleMania card. Would you have liked that as well, or is it maybe just me? And like I said, it has its pros and its cons, so it's not... What we got instead was still good, and on the whole, I thought this was a decent WrestleMania. I really enjoyed the Money in the Bank match. I enjoyed the triple threat match for the World Heavyweight Championship. Should have gotten more time. Cena and Triple H was solid as well. Taker and Mark Henry, meh. Booker T and Boogeyman, and Edge and Mick Foley, the match of the night, hands down. The rest of the matches were just kind of there. Solid, not terrible. The only truly terrible match on the show was Boogeyman versus Booker T and Sharmell. That should not have happened, but everything else was decent. But I really enjoyed Edge and Foley, though. But like always, if any one match from this show that you should go out of your way to watch, of course, needless to say, Edge and Mick Foley. That matchup was phenomenal. Go back and watch that on the network. But I'll be back on Saturday with my review of WrestleMania 23. So make sure to stay tuned for that. But in the meantime, in between time, folks, like I said before, you can find me on Facebook at Graham Jason Matthews, on Twitter at WrestleRant. Make sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe. All support is greatly appreciated. Thanks for watching and listening, folks, and I'll catch you guys in my next review this Saturday.